Nurse Christina Riggs, convicted of smothering her 2 young children to death in 1997.
I normally reached out and told somebody what I was feeling or thinking.
On May 2, 2000, inside the walls of the Cummins unit in Arkansas, the quiet hum of machinery broke the stillness of the evening. After years of appeals, court hearings, and endless public debate, 28-year-old Christina Marie Riggs was executed by lethal injection for one of the most horrifying crimes the state had ever seen. Her story was not one of a career criminal or a stranger committing violence against another. She was a nurse, a mother, and someone who once dedicated her life to caring for others. But on one November night in 1997, something in her broke, and what followed would leave the nation stunned, forcing people to question how far despair can push a human being. In this video, we'll uncover what happened that night inside her home in Sherwood, Arkansas, what led Christina Riggs, a mother of 2, to take such an unthinkable step, what her final moments were like, and what her last words revealed before she took her final breath. The case of Christina Riggs wasn't just about crime or punishment. It was about pain, guilt, and the collapse of a fragile mind. And in the end, her execution would become one of the most emotionally complex moments in the history of the Arkansas death penalty. It was the night of November 4, 1997, when the small town of Sherwood, Arkansas, fell silent. Inside a modest home on Greenway Drive, 26-year-old Christina Riggs was alone with her 2 children, Justin, 5 years old, and Shelby, just 2. She had finished her shift as a nurse, tucked them into bed, and sat quietly in the living room, her mind consumed by despair she had hidden from everyone. Christina had spent weeks spiraling deeper into depression. As a nurse at the Arkansas Heart Hospital, she had access to medical drugs that most people never saw outside a clinic. That night, she decided to use them, not to heal, but to end the suffering she believed her family was trapped in. Around midnight, Christina prepared syringes filled with potassium chloride, the same chemical used in lethal injections. She intended to end the lives of her children painlessly, then take her own. She injected her son first, but the dose failed to work as expected. In panic and confusion, she smothered him with a pillow. Then she turned to Shelby, repeating the same act. Afterward, she wrote a suicide note. In it, she apologized and said she couldn't handle life anymore. She then took several antidepressant pills and injected herself with a sedative, hoping to die beside her children. But unlike them, she survived. By the next morning, Christina Riggs was unconscious, but alive. What began as an act she thought would bring peace had become a scene of unspeakable horror. The following morning, November 5, 1997, co-workers at the Arkansas Heart Hospital began to worry. Christina Riggs hadn't shown up for her shift, and she hadn't called in sick. It wasn't like her to simply disappear. One of her colleagues decided to contact her mother, Carol Thomas, who lived nearby. When Carol arrived at her daughter's home in Sherwood, she noticed the house was locked and eerily quiet. She knocked several times, calling out Christina's name. No answer. Using her spare key, she stepped inside, unaware of the tragedy waiting behind the bedroom door. What she found was every parent's worst nightmare. On the bed lay Justin and Shelby, lifeless and neatly tucked under the covers as if they were sleeping. Nearby, Christina was sprawled on the floor, barely breathing. On the nightstand sat 2 syringes, several empty medication vials, and a folded letter, her suicide note. Panicked, Carol called 911. Paramedics arrived within minutes, rushing Christina to Baptist Memorial Hospital in Little Rock. Doctors quickly realized she had attempted suicide using drugs taken from her workplace but would survive. The children, however, could not be revived. Inside the home, police collected everything: the syringes, the handwritten note, and traces of the same chemicals used in hospital procedures. The note left no doubt. Christina Riggs had confessed in her own handwriting to killing her children because she didn't want them to grow up suffering. As investigators pieced together the scene, the picture became clearer. This was not a spontaneous act of violence, but a carefully planned tragedy born from deep psychological despair. Christina Riggs recovered physically within days, but emotionally, she was a shell of the person she once was. When she awoke in the hospital under police watch, her first words were not about herself, but about her children. "Are they gone?" she whispered. When officers confirmed it, she broke down, and then said quietly, "I deserve to die." From that moment on, Riggs never denied what she had done. She gave a full confession to detectives, describing in detail how she prepared the syringes, how the drugs failed, and how she resorted to smothering the children. Every word of her statement was recorded, and she never tried to excuse herself. Her trial began in June 1998 at the Pulaski County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members, and even former co-workers who still couldn't comprehend how the gentle nurse they knew had turned into a killer. The prosecution painted her as cold and deliberate, a mother who methodically planned to end her children's lives. They read the suicide note aloud, emphasizing her preparation and her choice to kill rather than seek help. The defense didn't deny the crime either. Instead, they focused on her deteriorating mental health, her depression, and her suicidal state of mind. Psychiatrists testified that Riggs suffered from severe clinical depression, worsened by isolation and financial stress after a divorce. But the jury saw the facts as clear. 2 innocent children were gone, and she had planned it all. After only a few hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty of capital murder. When asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, Christina Riggs said softly, "I don't have the right to live after what I've done." The court sentenced her to death by lethal injection. By the spring of 2000, Christina Riggs had spent nearly 2 years on death row at the Cummins unit in Grady, Arkansas. During that time, she received few visits. She rarely spoke to the press, and her attorneys noted she showed no fear of dying. Instead, she often repeated the same phrase, "I want to go be with my babies." Riggs declined to pursue further appeals. Her lawyers attempted to delay the execution on grounds of mental illness, but she refused to sign any petitions. She had accepted her fate. The Arkansas Supreme Court upheld her right to waive her appeals, and Governor Mike Huckabee signed the death warrant. Her execution date was set for May 2, 2000. In her final hours, Christina Riggs spent most of the afternoon in silence. She declined the offer of a special last meal, requesting only the standard prison dinner. At around 8:59 p.m., she was escorted into the execution chamber, calm, composed, and without resistance. Witnesses described her demeanor as peaceful. When asked for any final statement, she looked toward the observation window and said softly, "I love you, my babies." Then after a brief pause, she added, "Now I can be with my children." At 9:01 p.m., the lethal injection began. Within minutes, her breathing slowed. She was pronounced dead at 9:12 p.m. Christina Riggs became the first woman executed in Arkansas in more than 150 years and the only mother in state history to be put to death for killing her own children. The execution of Christina Riggs left Arkansas and the entire country deeply divided. Some believed justice had been served. 2 innocent children were gone, and the person responsible had faced the same fate. Others saw it as a tragedy that revealed how untreated mental illness can destroy an entire family. In the days following her death, news outlets described her as calm, resigned, and heartbreakingly maternal even in her final moments. For many, her story became a warning, a reminder that depression and despair can grow silently behind ordinary smiles. For others, it raised a painful question about justice. Should a mother who killed in the depths of hopelessness have been executed, or should she have been treated? Christina Riggs' case remains one of the most haunting in American history. It was not a crime of hate, greed, or revenge. It was a collapse of the human spirit. And in her last words, when she said she wanted to be with her children, it was clear she never truly escaped the guilt that consumed her. That's the story of Christina Riggs, the nurse, the mother, and the woman whose crime forced America to confront both mercy and justice on the same night. What do you think? Was this execution fair, or was it a tragedy multiplied by 3? Let me know in the comments below.